First Contact and Misconceptions. High Admiral Xerax of the Galaxian Empire stood motionless before the quantum display, her iridescent scales shifting colors as she processed the unusual data stream. The primitive electromagnetic waves had been detected by their long-range sensors, originating from a previously unexplored spiral arm of the galaxy. These weren't the usual random emissions of a developing civilization. They were structured, purposeful, and surprisingly complex. "Analysis complete, High Admiral," announced Chief Science Officer Ventfor, his tentacles dancing across the holographic interface. The signals appear to be entertainment broadcasts, military communications, and something they call internet traffic. The species identifies themselves as humans. Xerax's secondary eyes narrowed, a sign of deep contemplation among her kind. The Galaxian Empire had encountered countless species over their 10,000 years of expansion, but none had quite matched this peculiar pattern of development. These humans still used combustion engines and silicon-based computing, yet their quantum encryption protocols were remarkably sophisticated. "Their primary power source?" she inquired, mandibles clicking softly. "Primarily fossil fuels and nuclear fission, High Admiral. Though we're detecting unusual energy signatures that don't match any known power generation methods in our database." The command center of the flagship, Eternal Dawn, hummed with activity as more data poured in. The humans had colonized their lunar satellite, established bases on their neighboring red planet, and were beginning to venture further into their solar system. All this with technology that should have been centuries behind such achievements. "Prepare a first contact delegation," Xerax commanded. "Standard Protocol 7. Technological superiority display, followed by integration proposals." She paused, adding, "And bring the subjugation fleet to standby." History suggests primitive species often react emotionally to first contact. The Galaxian diplomatic vessel materialized in high Earth orbit exactly one planetary rotation later. Their antimatter drives and quantum displacement technology would surely inspire appropriate awe in these primitives. The response they received, however, was not what anyone expected. "Greetings, Galaxian vessel," came the transmission in perfect galactic standard. "We've been expecting you. Would you prefer to dock with the International Space Station, or shall we meet on neutral ground, say our lunar base?" The command center fell silent. Chief Communications Officer Krellix's tendrils twisted in confusion. "High Admiral, they shouldn't have been able to detect our arrival, let alone translate our language so quickly." Xerax felt an unfamiliar sensation. Uncertainty. The human's response lacked the expected fear, awe, or aggression. Instead, there was an almost casual friendliness that suggested confidence. "Their orbital platforms are adjusting position," reported the tactical officer. "But our sensors can't determine their purpose. The energy readings are inconsistent." As the Galaxian delegation prepared to dock with the International Space Station, more peculiarities emerged. The station appeared to be built with primitive materials, mostly aluminum and steel alloys. Yet somehow, it was generating a gravitational field that shouldn't have been possible with their supposed level of technology. The human greeting party wore simple clothing, no ceremonial robes or display of rank typical of primitive species encountering advanced civilizations. Their leader, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, smiled warmly as she extended her hand in their species' traditional greeting. "Welcome to Earth," she said, still speaking perfect galactic standard. "We've prepared quite a few questions about your quantum displacement drive. Our engineers are particularly interested in how you've solved the Heisenberg compensation issues." Xerax's scales shifted to a deep purple, a sign of profound shock among her kind. These humans shouldn't even know about quantum displacement theory, let alone its technical challenges. She began to suspect that the Galaxian Empire's standard protocols for first contact might need significant revision. As they toured the station, Dr. Chen casually mentioned their recent breakthroughs in dark matter manipulation, temporal mechanics, and something called quantum consciousness integration. Each casual reference sent ripples of disbelief through the Rylaxian delegation. The humans weren't primitive at all. They had simply chosen a different path of technological development, one that the Rylaxian Empire, with all its advanced technology, had never considered possible. And as Zorax would soon discover, this was just the beginning of their surprises. The silent strategy. The Rylaxian High Council's emergency session stretched into its third rotation as reports from Earth continued to confound their greatest minds. High Admiral Zorax stood before the assembled council, her scales now a troubled shade of amber as she delivered her assessment. The humans have masked their true technological capabilities behind a facade of primitive development, she explained, manipulating the holographic display to show Earth's apparent contradictions. What we initially dismissed as inefficient infrastructure appears to be an elaborate camouflage system. Council Elder Mixtall leaned forward, his ancient scales barely shimmering in the chamber's soft light. Explain the purpose of this deception, Admiral. Why would an advanced species choose to appear primitive? Because, Honored Elder, they've been watching us. Watching everyone. Zorax brought up a new display showing hundreds of tiny satellites scattered throughout nearby systems. These devices appear to be simple space debris, yet they're actually quantum-entangled observation posts. The humans have been studying galactic civilizations for centuries. The council chamber erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Surveillance technology of that sophistication should have been impossible to hide from Rylaxian sensors. Yet the evidence was undeniable. There's more, Zorax continued. During our tour of their lunar facility, we detected energy signatures suggesting they've developed consciousness transfer technology. They can move their minds between organic and synthetic bodies at will. The implications for their military capabilities are concerning. The Council's military advisor, General Kexnor, rose from his seat. Are you suggesting these humans pose a threat to the Empire? I'm suggesting, General, that we severely underestimated them. Their approach to technological development follows no known pattern. While we focused on quantum displacement and antimatter manipulation, they explored consciousness manipulation and dark matter integration. Their military vessels don't need to match our firepower. They can simply transfer their crew's consciousness to backup bodies if their ships are destroyed. Security footage from the lunar base tour played before the council. It showed Dr. Chen casually walking through what should have been a lethal radiation leak without protection. When questioned, she had simply smiled and mentioned something about distributed consciousness backups. They're not afraid of death, Zorax stated plainly. Not in any way we understand. And that makes their military strategy impossible to predict using our traditional models. The council chambers darkened as new data streamed in. Earth's orbital platforms had begun moving again, but in patterns that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Some appeared to be merging, others splitting apart. The humans called it emergent swarm behavior. Their technology isn't just different from ours, Zorax explained. It's fundamentally alien in its approach. They don't see the distinction between organic and synthetic that our entire civilization is built upon. Their ships aren't just vessels, they're extensions of human consciousness. A junior council member raised a trembling appendage. But surely our superior numbers mean nothing, Zorax interrupted. We've detected quantum signatures suggesting they can manufacture new vessels in minutes using some form of matter replication technology. Every attempt to scan their production facilities is met with data that seems deliberately contradictory. The council chamber fell into uneasy silence as the implications settled in. The Rylaxian Empire had encountered numerous advanced civilizations before, but none that had so completely upended their understanding of technological progress. There's one more thing, Zorax added, her scales shifting to a deep blue of grave concern. We've detected traces of temporal manipulation around their solar system. Subtle distortions that suggest they're not just operating in three-dimensional space. They might be using time itself as a strategic resource. Elder Mixtall's scales paled to an almost translucent shade. You mean? Yes, Honored Elder. We're not just dealing with a civilization that chose a different path of development. We're dealing with one that might be experiencing reality itself in a fundamentally different way. And they've been watching us, learning about us, while we remained completely unaware of their true nature. As if to punctuate her point, a new message arrived from Earth. Dr. Chen was requesting a follow-up meeting, this time at what she called a temporal research facility. The message ended with a casual postscript. Don't worry about bringing temporal shielding. We'll provide everything you need to stay causally consistent. The Rylaxian High Council, for the first time in its 1,000-year history, found itself facing a question it had never considered. What do you do when you discover you're not the most advanced civilization in the room, and never were? Turning the tables. The Temporal Research Facility defied everything the Rylaxian delegation thought they knew about physics. Located in what humans called the Atacama Desert, the facility appeared to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. High Admiral Xerax felt her scales rippling involuntarily as she watched the same human scientist walk past their group 3 times, each version clearly from a different point in time, all perfectly coordinated. Impressive, isn't it? Dr. Chen smiled, noting their discomfort. We found it easier to solve temporal paradoxes by simply accepting them. Your civilization tried to prevent temporal contradictions. We embraced them. The facility's central chamber housed what appeared to be a simple glass sphere floating in midair, yet every instrument in the Rylaxian delegation's arsenal failed to provide consistent readings of its properties. It seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere at once. We call it the chronosphere, Dr. Chen explained, walking around the floating orb. It's both our greatest achievement and our most basic research tool. It allows us to observe any point in time and space, though affecting what we observe is complicated. Xerax's chief scientist, Verlox, finally found his voice. You're manipulating causality itself. The energy requirements alone should be impossible. Dr. Chen finished his sentence. That's because you're thinking in linear terms. We don't generate energy to power our temporal experiments. We borrow it from all possible futures and pasts simultaneously. The net energy expenditure is actually 0. The implications hit Xerax like a quantum surge. Every analysis, every strategic calculation the Empire had made about human capabilities was fundamentally flawed. They hadn't just underestimated human technology. They'd failed to comprehend the very nature of human scientific advancement. Your entire civilization, Xerax began carefully, exists in a state of temporal flux. Not exactly, Dr. Chen replied. We maintain what we call conscious temporal coherence. Each human experiences time linearly, but our civilization as a whole operates across multiple temporal states. It's how we manage to develop so many different technological paths simultaneously. A holographic display activated, showing the evolutionary history of human technology. But unlike the linear progression the Rylaxians had expected, it displayed as a complex web of interconnected developments across multiple timelines. While one branch of humanity pursued quantum computing, another explored biological enhancement, and yet another developed consciousness transfer. Dr. Chen continued. The chronosphere allows us to share discoveries across these developmental branches without causing temporal collapse. Xerax's scales shifted to deep violet, a color of profound revelation. The primitive technology we observed, it's not a facade. It's simply one layer of your civilization's development, existing simultaneously with your more advanced achievements. Precisely, Dr. Chen nodded. We found it more efficient to maintain multiple technological paradigms simultaneously. Why abandon combustion engines when they're still useful for some purposes? Why not have quantum computers and silicon processors working in parallel? The delegation watched as a group of scientists in another part of the facility appeared to work backwards through time, disassembling a complex device into its component parts, each movement precise and purposeful. The process looked almost like a dance, choreographed across multiple temporal dimensions. But the military implications, General Kexnor began, his military mind already calculating scenarios. "Are precisely why we're showing you this," Dr. Chen interrupted, her expression growing serious for the first time. "The Rylaxian Empire has a history of incorporating other civilizations into its sphere of influence. We wanted you to understand why that would be a particularly poor decision in Earth's case." As if to emphasize her point, the chronosphere pulsed briefly, and suddenly every member of the Rylaxian delegation saw themselves from multiple temporal angles simultaneously. The experience lasted only a moment, but its message was clear. Humanity's mastery over time itself made them virtually impossible to defeat through conventional means. "We don't want conflict," Dr. Chen continued, her tone softening. "We're showing you this because we believe in transparency between potential allies. The Rylaxian Empire has achieved remarkable things with its linear approach to technological development. Imagine what we could accomplish together if we combined our different perspectives." Xerax found herself facing a decision that would reshape the Empire's future. The humans weren't just offering cooperation, they were offering an entirely new way of perceiving reality itself. The question was no longer whether humanity could be subjugated, but whether the Empire was ready to accept a fundamental challenge to its own worldview. And somewhere in the facility, another version of this same scene was playing out in a different timeline, with slightly different words but leading to the same inevitable conclusion. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted, not through force or conquest, but through humanity's unique ability to think beyond the constraints of linear time and technological progress. The Great Deception. High Admiral Xerax stood before the Rylaxian High Council once again, but this time the chamber bristled with a new kind of tension. The quantum displays surrounding them showed something unprecedented. Every single human settlement, from Earth to their furthest space colonies, had transformed overnight. "They never needed to hide," Xerax announced, her scales shimmering with a mix of awe and trepidation. "What we saw as their civilization was merely a fraction of their true presence in the galaxy. They weren't masking their technology, they were giving us time to adjust." The holographic displays showed cities morphing into crystalline structures that defied conventional physics, orbital platforms unfolding into massive arrays that seemed to bend space-time itself, and vessels emerging from what appeared to be pocket dimensions. 24 hours ago, they initiated what they called Protocol Revelation. Xerax continued. Every human settlement simultaneously shifted to reveal their actual technological state. The timing was precise, coordinated across thousands of light years without any observable communication delay. Elder Mixtel's ancient frame trembled slightly. "How many settlements are we talking about, Admiral?" "We've identified 347 major colonies spread across 6 spiral arms of the galaxy. But that's not the most concerning part." Xerax manipulated the display to show a series of quantum readings. Each settlement exists in multiple temporal states simultaneously. They're not just spread across space. They're spread across time itself. The council chamber erupted in confused discussions. General Kexnor slammed his appendage against his console. "Impossible. Our deep space sensors would have detected." "Nothing," Xerax interrupted, "because they weren't hiding their technology. They were hiding space itself. Each human settlement exists within what they call a quantum fold, a bubble of altered space-time that our sensors interpreted as normal space. We weren't just looking at a disguise. We were looking at exactly what they wanted us to see." New data streamed in, showing human vessels performing maneuvers that seemed to violate every known law of physics. They didn't just move through space. They moved with space, folding reality around them like fabric. "Their quantum consciousness technology isn't just for backup bodies," Xerax explained. "It's the foundation of their entire civilization. Every human mind exists simultaneously across multiple bodies, time streams, and dimensions. They don't think like we do. They think in quantum superposition." A message from Earth appeared in the center of the chamber, displaying Dr. Chen's familiar face. But this time, her image seemed to exist in multiple states at once, each version slightly different, all speaking in perfect synchronization. "We hope you understand now," the multiple Dr. Chen spoke, "why traditional concepts of military superiority or technological dominance don't apply to our species. We didn't develop technology to conquer space and time. We developed it to become one with them." The message continued, revealing more shocking truths. The humans hadn't just achieved technological supremacy, they transcended the very concept of technological progression. Their civilization existed in a state of perpetual quantum flux, simultaneously primitive and advanced, unified and diverse, present and eternal. "What they showed us at the Temporal Research Facility," Zorak said, her voice heavy with realization, "wasn't their most advanced technology. It was their most basic. They weren't demonstrating their capabilities. They were teaching us how to comprehend what we were about to see." The council watched in stunned silence as more human settlements revealed themselves, each one demonstrating technologies that seemed more like magic than science. They hadn't just mastered time travel. They'd made it obsolete. They hadn't just conquered death. They'd redefined existence itself. "They're offering us a choice," Zorax concluded, "not between war and peace, but between remaining as we are and evolving into something entirely new. They want to share their understanding of reality itself, not as conquerors or teachers, but as equals who simply arrived at this point through a different path." As if to emphasize this point, the quantum displays showed human children playing in parks that existed in multiple temporal states, their laughter echoing across dimensions. They weren't using their technology, they were living it, as natural as breathing. The Rylaxian Empire, with all its power and ancient wisdom, found itself facing not just a superior civilization, but a fundamentally different way of existing in the universe, and somewhere in the quantum flux of human consciousness. Dr. Chen smiled, knowing that the real revelations were yet to come. A new understanding. One standard galactic year had passed since protocol revelation, and the universe had changed in ways none of the Rylaxian Empire could have predicted. High Admiral Zarax, now serving as the Empire's primary liaison to Earth, stood in what the humans called a quantum commons, a space that existed simultaneously in every human settlement across the galaxy. "It's still difficult to comprehend," she admitted to Dr. Chen, watching as beings from 1,000 worlds mingled in the impossible space. "Your species didn't just advance technologically. You fundamentally altered the nature of existence itself." Dr. Chen, or rather, one of her many quantum-linked instances, smiled warmly. "We didn't alter existence, Admiral. We simply learned to perceive it as it truly is. The universe was always quantum in nature. We just decided to embrace that fact rather than try to force it into classical models." The quantum commons buzzed with activity. Rylaxian scientists worked alongside human researchers, their scales shifting through colors of excitement and wonder as they explored concepts that would have been incomprehensible a year ago. Young Rylaxians, more adaptable than their elders, had already begun to grasp the basics of quantum consciousness integration. "Your children are particularly adept," Dr. Chen observed, gesturing toward a group of Rylaxian younglings participating in what humans called quantum play, their consciousness spreading across multiple temporal states as naturally as their ancestors had once swum in water. "They don't have to unlearn the limitations we adults place on reality." Zarex's scales rippled with maternal pride as she watched her own daughter among them. The young ones didn't see human technology as something alien or superior. To them, it was simply another way of being, as natural as the quantum crystalline technology of their own people. "We were wrong about so many things," Zarex mused. "We thought technological advancement meant moving forward in a straight line, always abandoning the old for the new. Your people showed us that true advancement means expanding in all directions simultaneously." The space around them shifted, and suddenly they were viewing the galaxy from multiple perspectives at once, each view representing a different possible timeline, different choices, different paths of development. Yet somehow, in every timeline where humans and Rylaxians met, they eventually reached this point of understanding. That's why you revealed yourselves the way you did, Zorax realized. You didn't just show us your technology, you showed us our own potential. Precisely, Dr. Chen nodded, her form flickering through multiple quantum states. The universe isn't a hierarchy to be climbed, but a web to be explored. Every civilization, every species, every individual finds their own path through that web. Some paths look primitive to others, some appear advanced, but they're all valid expressions of conscious existence. Around them, the quantum commons continued to evolve. Rylaxian quantum crystal technology began to merge with human temporal manipulation, creating new possibilities that neither civilization had imagined alone. Trading ships now navigated through quantum folds in spacetime, while cultural exchange happened across multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. Your empire feared us when you first discovered our true nature, Dr. Chen said, her expression thoughtful. You expected us to dominate, to conquer, to impose our way of existing on others. But that's not our path. We believe that the universe becomes richer with every new perspective, every different approach to understanding reality. Zorax felt her scales shift to a color that hadn't existed in her species' spectrum before their contact with humanity, a shade that represented the emotion of transcendent understanding. You didn't want subjects or students. You wanted collaborators in exploring the true nature of existence. The universe is vast. Dr. Chen agreed, but consciousness, in all its forms, is the greatest frontier. Every species that achieves quantum awareness adds something unique to the collective understanding of reality. As if to demonstrate this point, a group of human and Rylaxian scientists activated a new kind of quantum fold, one that combined the crystalline precision of Rylaxian technology with the temporal fluidity of human innovation. The result was something entirely new, a space that existed not just across multiple dimensions and timelines, but that actively adapted to the consciousness of those within it. This is just the beginning, Dr. Chen said, her smile reflecting across multiple quantum states. Together, we're not just exploring the universe, we're expanding the very definition of what's possible. The quantum commons shimmered with potential, filled with beings who had moved beyond the old questions of superiority and dominance to embrace a deeper truth, that the greatest achievement of any civilization isn't in conquering others, but in learning to see through their eyes, think with their minds, and understand with their hearts. And somewhere, in every possible timeline, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if in approval of this new chapter in the story of conscious existence.